Good morning to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. Thursday now, the 13th of June, 2024. Finishing up the hail work here in Colorado. Working yesterday with my colleague Matt out here. Switching gears now, really starting to focus on hurricane season and getting our Tacoma ready and all the other gear. Flying home later today, so that will be good. But the tropics are definitely newsworthy. You see what happened yesterday? The thumbnail, which will be made later and eventually inserted into this for today's update by our colleague CJ, says it all, that 90L won for the record books. Sometimes these disturbances can be as impactful as a full-on hurricane -2 of the impacts. The wind, no real appreciable wind with 90L, and no storm surge, of course. But the rainfall, holy cow. What was going on yesterday and even the day before. We saw Sarasota in vicinity, and then yesterday with Southeast Florida. And look, I don't want to become one of these people that's just going to pat himself on the back every time, but I told you 2 or 3 days ago that this is what could happen. We saw it in the modeling. We knew what could be possible with all that extra moisture in the air. And I warned you, I told you that Southeast Florida, especially with that high concentration of population, the flight delays, the travel problems, the extreme flooding that was possible, and that is exactly what happened. Wow. So let's just take a look at what we've got out there this morning. Here's 90L now, the center of it, what center there is, off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida and vicinity. Only a 20% chance of development. If you saw my video yesterday, the Euro was pretty aggressive at developing this as it got out into this area. It has since generally backed off. And it looks like the GFS solution will be the one that generally works out. We'll see. There's still time on the clock, but it doesn't look like 90L is going to do too much over the next few days. It's already done enough, right? Here's the 7-day outlook, and that includes this system down here, which will be 91L eventually, probably. And we have to watch this for potential impacts for our friends over here in Mexico, somewhere in this vicinity perhaps. We'll see. This entire area is going to be unsettled for the next probably week to 10 days, and we have to watch this very closely as these pieces of energy rotate around this gyre that's down here, and some of those could eventually consolidate and give us some trouble in this region. We're not sure exactly how it's going to pan out. The models rarely have a good handle on it because it's such a messy and complicated situation. Here's the satellite animation early this morning, pretty early out here in Colorado, for me anyway. But I got to get up and catch the flight home. It looks like Colorado right here is nice and clear today, so no weather problems for me as I head back to Wilmington, North Carolina. And hopefully the rainfall can really come to an end down here in South Florida and people can start drying out and doing what they can to recover from that torrential rain. 91L sitting out here. Some deeper convection associated with it right there, but really not ideal upper level support. Most of the other ingredients are there. Plentiful moisture, the very warm waters of the Atlantic and so forth, but the upper level winds just not supporting this to become better organized. But who needs that when you had all of that rain again in the Florida Peninsula area? Now for the Central American gyre mess, it's still pretty much just a big mess, but that being said, copious amounts of rain over parts of southeast Mexico, Guatemala, and up into the Yucatan Peninsula as that system slowly just sits down there, that big gyre, and just does what it does. So in case you needed more proof, here's the headline tweet here from Fox Weather.
Miami, this was 8 hours of crazy.
Yeah, 8 hours of craziness. Unbelievable. The video coming out yesterday and yesterday evening on social media. Unbelievable flooding down there. 25 inches in the last 2 days at the Big Cypress Nature Reserve. North Miami, 20 inches of rain. Are you kidding me? Just incredible. It really is, further emphasizing that rain is a substantial impact. Our friend Jeff here, weather professor, or weather prof on Twitter, you remember last year, hopefully, last April, 25 inches of rain in Fort Lauderdale, around 10 inches today in the last 24 hours, and a generally wetter than normal pattern in 2023 means that the surplus in Fort Lauderdale is 59 inches over the last 18 months. that surplus alone is equal to a year's worth of rain. And you can really see the culprit here, this almost atmospheric river type event just coming right through, partially aided by the Central American gyre and the incredibly warm and moist air mass down here associated with the above normal sea surface temperatures in the Caribbean. And by the way, you can clearly see a well-developed tropical wave right there for what it's worth as it comes through, a pretty high amplitude wave. Lots of energy out there across the Atlantic basin. So what are our systems going to do over the next several days? Well, let's take a look at the GFS here. This is from the 6Z run. And again, this is that 850 millibar part of the atmosphere that I like to look at. And that cyclonic vorticity is any of this energy trying to bundle and focus rather than remaining spread out. That's what we're looking for. Not so much. It doesn't really do too much, and maybe a little bit there in about the next 36 hours or so, right off the Cape Fear and Outer Banks area, Cape Lookout, Cape Hatteras, the three capes of North Carolina, but no appreciable impacts on shore. Maybe a slight increase in rough seas or something like that. If you're heading to the beach this weekend, just pay attention. You should always do that to what the local warnings are and advisories from the National Weather Service for possibility of rip currents or what have you. But the GFS not very enthusiastic about it. Then we start to really focus on what happens down here. And here's these pieces of energy that I'm talking about that are going around with this gyre. Just look at the wind barbs here, and they're all tracing out that counterclockwise gyre, as it's called, and pieces of energy trying to rotate through and maybe do something, maybe not. There's one piece that comes down there from the extreme southwestern Caribbean Sea just over the next 2 to 3 days. Is it spurious? Is it really going to be there? I mean, that's a really rapid development into a small system if it were to happen. And then the stuff gets into the Gulf, or the southern Gulf anyway, the Bay of Campeche, and just kind of mills around down there. And again, all of this tells me there's energy, lots of energy, and that's going to equate to a lot more rainfall in that area as well. The Euro, again, backing off what it was showing yesterday. And let me just show you, just to kind of review. This is the 12Z from yesterday, and this is how enthusiastic the Euro was. Remember that? And now we look at the 0Z last night, and not so much on the good old ECMWF for whatever reason. It was just overly enthusiastic. Still fairly well organized, especially for June, but it doesn't really do too much with that system. Kind of catches it into the trough, and off it goes. And then again, as we were watching with the GFS, we'll see what happens with all of this energy down here. And over the next week to 10 days or so, that's what the Euro shows. Just a lot of overall unsettledness. And you can see why we need to watch this. There's that huge piece of just rotating energy down there, an incubator for potential tropical cyclone trouble down the road. So we shall see what we shall see. I don't have a thumbnail just yet to exit on, but CJ will get that for later when we put this on YouTube. It's all good. It's pretty early in the morning, and he has a day job, you know. He helps me out when he can. But I wanted to get this update in for you before I got on the plane here in Denver and head back home and keep watching all of this stuff, all right? As always, thanks for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. I'll see you tomorrow morning back home in North Carolina.